Hey guys, so I come to you today with a video that is um, out of the norm for me at least. So this is not my car, at least I don't own this car. I'm about 20 odd kilometers outside of Stuttgart. Yes, in Germany. My wife and I are here on a vacation, on a road trip. We've driven about five or 6,000 odd kilometers all around Germany, essentially in a round ring. And this car here, the 2017 I think Audi A6 Avant TDI, has been our companion through all of it, and it's been a beautiful car. So I thought, since I've spent a good 2 weeks and about 5-6,000 odd kilometers with this car, obviously it's not a long-term report, but then I thought that I'd share what my experience with this car has been over the last 2 weeks or so. Obviously, to viewers who are outside of the US, specifically in Europe, this will probably be a big fat meh for you, because if based on what I could see, this seems to be the A6 Avant seems to be probably one of the most popular family wagons, so to speak, mid-sized wagons here in Germany or in Europe in general. But obviously, to my viewers in US, this is going to be a unicorn, because not only is this a wagon, which you don't get in the US, it's also a diesel wagon. And this particular version, I was absolutely sure to let Sixt know while booking the car that I wanted the 3-liter V6 diesel, not the 2-liter 4-cylinder diesel. Also, I apologize in advance if there's a lot of background noise. I literally have pulled out near a parking lot outside of the Autobahn, so you will hear cars and trucks whizzing by. Again, this is going to be a fairly short video, just to share my thoughts with you guys about the 2017 A6 Avant TDI. Alright, as I mentioned, so this happens to be the V6 TDI version of the A6. I was specific to let Sixt know at the time of booking that I did not want the 2-liter 4-cylinder. Now, that being said, even though this says V6 TDI, this exact same engine, or essentially the exact same engine, if I'm not mistaken, comes in 3 different tunes, so to speak. Literally tunes, because that seems to be the only big difference between the 3 cars, I think, apart from the size of the intercooler. So if I am not mistaken, and I can confirm this once I get back and look at the VIN and whatnot, this seems to be the mid-tune. I say that because the base model does not seem to be available with the Quattro all-wheel drive setup. It's front-wheel drive only, and this is Quattro. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the mid-tune, the mid-range tune. Definitely not the highest end tune of the V6 TDI. But nevertheless, I'm absolutely in love with this engine. For one, it's great to drive a diesel again. For those of you who don't know, we actually had a Golf Sportwagen diesel for about 4 years. It was my wife's daily driver. We absolutely loved that car. In fact, we were crushed when we had to sell the car back to VW, because we didn't really want to. It's just that it just made the right financial sense. But much more importantly, for something like the Autobahn in Germany, where fuel is well, expensive, but you want to be able to cruise the Autobahn in absolute comfort, something like this car and this engine is the best combination. I say that because the car can effortlessly keep up, or actually beat, most of the rest of the traffic while on the left lane. At the same time, over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, we've been averaging approximately about 35 miles per gallon ish. I think it's around 6.9 liters per 100 kilometers. That's the way they measure the fuel economy here, which is absolutely incredible given the size of the car, and the fact that you'll see in a little video that I'll insert towards the bottom right of the corner. I have not been babying it. I've actually been, as I said, keeping up with the traffic, beating the traffic. I've made full use of the unrestricted zones on the Autobahn. And the car does an amazing job of isolating and insulating the road and whatnot from you while just powering through the Autobahn. Absolutely incredible engine vehicle combination. All right, now jumping on to the interior. Again, quick quick summary. It's not really a whole lot different from what's available in the US. So this is the C7 generation of the A6, obviously. The newer C8 generation has not been released in the US yet, and even here I think it's not been officially released for purchase. They just recently announced it. But fairly typical Audi interior for this generation, very clean, not quite minimalist as the newer generation, but again, excellent choice of materials, very clean, logical layout of all the instrument panels, the HVAC controls, the infotainment controls and whatnot. So what I will say though is that with respect to the infotainment system, this seems to be a Frankenstein mix of the what shipped with the A6 generation of cars originally, the MMI system, and the newer systems that shipped with the B9 generation of A4 cars. So this seems to be somewhere in between in terms of the quality of the actual graphics and the animation and whatnot, and also in terms of the overall features and UI and whatnot. So it gets the job done. It doesn't quite have the full virtual cockpit, but the dials are real. But then in between, you actually have the instrument screen right there. So again, as I said, it's essentially a halfway house between what you see in the B9 generation A4 and the pre-refresh A6 C7 A6 generation. So yeah, again, in terms of the features that are available in this car that to the best of my knowledge are not available in the US market cars. For one, this comes with the air suspension, and oh my god, what a difference does the air suspension make to the drive and feel of the car. It's absolutely awesome. What this car also comes with, and I think a lot of the European Audis come with this by default, I don't know if all of them do, is the efficiency mode. So folks in the US or North America will be familiar with Audi's drive select system, where you can choose between comfort, auto, dynamic and individual, and in some versions you also see off-road, I think in the all-road and some of the SUVs. What you see over here is the efficiency program. Now, before I get into the details of what this efficiency program is and does, note that for some reason, and I don't know if this is specific to this car, even though it has the actual drive select feature, it doesn't have a drive select button on the center panel. I checked all over, that doesn't seem to be the case over here, and I'm not sure why that is the case. But anyway, going back to the efficiency program piece, so this thing works amazingly well, because obviously it, as you can imagine, it dulls the throttle response, it reduces the effectiveness of the HVAC, but never, and for the majority of this trip we've been in efficiency mode. I can promise you that for a majority of the trip, my wife and I didn't really have any issues with the air conditioning, the way it worked or how effective it was. It worked perfectly fine. Likewise with the acceleration and the throttle, yes, it's dulled a little bit, but again, as long as you plan your overtaking maneuver well enough, it works really well, and it pays mighty dividends when it comes to the actual fuel efficiency. Again, as I mentioned, I have not been babying this car, and you can see it right now, it's around 7. That's because the last few kilometers were stuck in stop and go traffic, but on an average I've been getting anywhere between 6.5 and 7.1 liters per 100 kilometers. So that's somewhere in the low to high 30 miles per gallon range, which is, again, as I said, pretty incredible given the size and capabilities of this car. So what the efficiency program also does though is that I think between 50 kilometers per hour and I think 140 kilometers per hour, when you essentially let go of the accelerator, not brake, just let go of the accelerator, essentially coasting, the car actually switches to something called coasting mode. You will see a little below the little fuel gauge readout in the middle. Below that you'll see a little text that says coasting mode. What that essentially does is it disengages the transmission. You'll see the rev counter tachometer drop to 0. And that actually disengages the transmission, and what that does is it reduces drag in your drivetrain, and as a result, it's able to eke out the extra few percent of fuel savings, right? And I don't know how much it actually adds up to in and of itself, but again, as I said, it's worked really well in terms of our trip and the diesel mileage that we've been seeing out of the car. So, and also since this was the previous generation of Audis, you have the option to get the screen retreat inside the dashboard. I absolutely miss this in the newer gen Audis. My RS3 has it because it's previous gen, but the newer Audis and in fact BMWs and Benzes also don't have that feature, which really sucks. The rest of the dashboard is pretty typical. This particular car, I don't know if you can actually see it very clearly, comes with the Bose optional system, so which, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that's the mid-range. So it's not the base, but it's also not the higher end Bang & Olufsen. The door panels and whatnot are typical Audi. Over here, since this has the full MMI navigation, you see the touch pad over there. Unlike the newer Audis, the touch sensor is not built into the actual MMI knob itself. You have the playback controls over here. You have the rest of the MMI controls over here. You have a little cup holder there, as you can see a lot of the change. You have another little storage cubby over there up front. And the other thing that you won't see in the North American cars, at least to the best of my knowledge, is the Qi charger. So QI is the standard, the wireless charging standard known as Qi. For some reason, this is not even an option on the current generation North American A6 and A4s and whatnot, even if you get the tech package, which is just beyond me. Likewise, if you look at the seats, I love these seats. So these are not full leather seats. Again, you don't get these in North America. Again, not sure why, but these have leather on the sides and this beautiful suede, very comfortable suede, which on long distance trips like the ones that we've been having, very comfortable. And also in terms of sweat absorption, this obviously does a much better job than leather. That's a no-brainer. So it sucks that in North America, not only do we not get this car itself in the wagon form, but we don't get a lot of the options which make a lot of sense in a vehicle in a class like this. But I guess it is what it is. Then moving over to the back, obviously because this is a wagon, you have a massive boot. This would have actually, if this car were available in this form in the US, 100% I would have purchased this over the A4 all-road, because A, I don't need the raised height of the all-road, and B, I can actually make full use of the available boot space. The big difference between something like an A6 boot dimensions and something like the Q7 or the Q5 is the fact that the wagons tend to have much more length, whereas the SUVs tend to have much more height. And in my experience and opinion, the length is of much more use than the height, whether it's having dogs in the back or carrying a lot of IKEA stuff, or even 2x4s or whatnot. So for me, at least personally speaking from experience, a wagon's cargo area, even if the overall dimensions don't always match or exceed an SUV's, the dimensions are such that it's much more useful than that of an SUV. But again, it is what it is. So you have the release latch there for the rear seats. Typical to all modern Audi wagons, you have the privacy cover that rolls down as the hatch rolls down. But again, nothing extraordinarily different here. You have a lot of these extra cargo fitments as standard. To the best of my knowledge, all of these don't come standard on all the trims in the US. I think only if you get the Premium Plus and Prestige trims do you get any of these. So yeah, it is what it is. Alright, so to wrap it up, what I don't like about this car, first and foremost, the auto stop start. I now begin to realize why people in North America hate or started hating the auto stop start feature in general. All I can tell you is for whatever reason, the way the auto stop start feature is tuned for Europe and European cars is significantly different from how it is in North America. And I can at least make that comparison for my A4 all-road versus this A6. For some reason, the auto start stop feature on European cars is extremely aggressive, to the point where most of the time I've tried to turn this feature off. For one, in North America, the engine cuts off only not only when you come to a complete stop. You also need to apply a certain amount of brake force for the engine to cut off. That does not seem to be the case over here. Even at part brake, not all the way in, about 25% in, and even if I'm coming to a rolling stop, let's say I'm going at about 5, 6, 7, 8 miles per hour, the engine cuts off. And this is extremely frustrating. For example, when I'm trying to maneuver through a parking lot, where obviously I'm crawling around at very, very slow speeds, and I tend to modulate the brake a lot, and the engine keeps cutting off. Super annoying, super irritating. So again, as I said, I can understand why North American customers tend to hate this feature. Very likely because their first experience with stop-start would have been in a European car, and I don't like this implementation. And I'm very, very happy that Audi and BMW and Benz have tuned this down for the North American market. The second thing that I don't like, and this is less of a crib and more to do with the fact that it's a big car, is the turning radius on this seems to be painful. And the pain becomes all the more obvious when you're driving around in small European cities. It takes a fair bit of effort to maneuver this car. It took us a fair bit of effort to maneuver this car around some of the narrower streets of Stuttgart and Frankfurt and whatnot. So there is that. And the last thing is yes, it's a diesel, and therefore the throttle response, even when I'm not in efficiency mode, is can be best described as not enthusiastic, in that it takes it at least until about 1500 to 2000 rpm to really get going. But once it gets going, like once it's at around the 50-60 kilometer per hour range, it pulls like a freight train. But in stop and go traffic, even though it's a diesel with all the torque and everything, I think it's the gearing, which is tuned more towards efficiency, makes it seem a little lethargic, so to speak. But yeah, apart from those minor niggles, actually the auto start stop is a big niggle, but apart from that, I've really loved this car. In fact, I'm pretty sad to let this car go later today when I have to return the rental, which comes at the end of our 2-week trip. But yeah, so if you guys have any other questions, let me know in the video and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you.